So hi everyone, it's Dave Cool. Before we begin though, let me show you this scene.
What do we say to the god of death?
Not today.
In the last video we talked about Daenerys' character change in the last two episodes of Game of Thrones' final season, that one being the first part of a two-part series regarding certain aspects of this final season that were the most divisive regarding fans' opinions and criticisms. And so, in this one we'll be talking about, this time around, Arya Stark and the choice of Benioff and Weiss to make her the ultimate character to bring down one of the ultimate baddies of the show, and then, once and for all, what it felt to the characters in that episode, The Long Night. Episode 3 I think is where the real divisiveness, is that a word? Truly started. Some criticisms were made like the fact the episode's brightness was as dark as the night itself, not many major characters died, the long night itself wasn't long enough. But I think the one criticism that really caused the big friction inside the fanbase was this moment, Arya killing the Night King. If you're a Game of Thrones fan, I think it's needless to pinpoint in great detail why it was divisive. Jon should have been the one to kill the Night King. And like many other criticisms, I can also understand this one. Although, we need to take something in account. The world of Game of Thrones is not your typical fantasy world. Allow me then to defend why Arya being the one to strike the final blow was the right choice. Like George R. Martin made very clear in the beginning of his story, the world of Game of Thrones doesn't run by the classic fantasy genre rules. Yes, it takes influence from it, and yes, it's still very much part of its identity, but the fantasy elements are just elements that exist in what it will be the real world. Prophecies exist, magic exists, but they are still very much dictated by the rules of the real world. Yes, Jon was the classic hero, the one that in any other story should have battled to the death the opposing magical force, but that wouldn't have felt like Game of Thrones. Like we've seen before, Jon never stood a chance alone against the Night King, because he never had the skills in the first place to face him head on. I mean, not even a dragon could burn him down, the most powerful beast in all of Westeros. So what chance did Jon have against the most powerful force in the story to this point? The Night King from the very beginning was set up to be this unstoppable force, the personification of death itself. And how can you possibly stop death? There were two logical ways to realistically stop this force. One, have him actually win, kill Bran, and have the White Walkers march south to claim the rest of the living in Westeros, or two, have him be stopped and killed by in a way that didn't feel cheated. And no, it didn't feel cheated, because the only character who could have pulled off that job was Arya herself. Only she had the necessary skills to sneak up on a being that could not be defeated on a one-on-one fight or by a flaming blaze, that was so confident that could win that even when he had the chance, did not expect any to have the power to defeat him, and yet there was. Only Arya could have gotten as close, because only her could be so silent and unpredictable, because of the unusual training she received outside of Westeros. It actually was a fun callback to this scene in The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, flipping on its head the whole all man must die recurring theme. That was the whole point of that aspect of her arc, to become a faceless man, to defy the god of death and become who she was meant to be. Both in character and story, the decision to have her defeat the Night King was the most logical. Arya was the only one who had her training outside the normal conventions of Westerosi, and the only one who was the most calm and collected in times of most need. In fact, when watching the whole episode again, after that initial shock, it clicked even more for me. Not just because the Lord of Light's true end goal for Jon was to have him live to kill Daenerys, but when you compare his first encounter with the Night King with his last, you come to the realization that he was always meant to be just a piece of many pieces, although an important one, to the main puzzle. To have the Night King show him twice how leagues apart they were from each other in terms of power was cathartic in many ways, because it was a callback to reality, a statement to the whole notion of prophecy and destiny. In the end, it doesn't come down to a chosen one saving the world, but a series of moving parts, all with respective roles to play. Jon still played a big one, because without him, Daenerys wouldn't have been an important piece to making sure most of the White Walkers didn't breach Winterfell, the manpower wouldn't be as great, Winterfell wouldn't have been regained, and the whole stand wouldn't have happened in the first place, because only Sansa with the army of the Vale and some troops of the north wouldn't have been enough, had the wildlings not also helped. Plus a giant. Without Jon to bring everyone together, all the north, the Vale, the wildlings, the Unsullied, the Dothraki, Dany's dragons, the Night's Watch, wouldn't have joined forces in Winterfell, and the army of the dead would have won. So yeah, Jon still played a huge role, but that's why he should have been the one to have done it, and not Arya, who had no business being there in the first place. And yes, you're partially right about that. After all, Arya was supposed to go to King's Landing to kill Cersei, and she didn't knew nothing about the White Walker threat in the first place. But don't forget, the reason she came back to Winterfell was because the rest of her family that was still alive retook her home, and because of her wish to see them again was greater than her personal revenge for the ones she no longer called, she came back. If Jon and Sansa hadn't done that, indeed she wouldn't have been there in the first place. No, the whole point of coming together to defeat a common enemy didn't come to having a chosen one ending it, but instead, the efforts of all of them to make sure all the position pieces were there in the first place to finish the puzzle. Arya, Bran, Jon, Daenerys, Melisandre, all of them, the men and women who fought valiantly, were the heroes who ended the long night. I hope you've enjoyed this two-part series regarding my opinions on these controversial story points in this final season of one of the most beloved shows of all time. Noted that these are my personal feelings, and that I'm not right or wrong, and that everyone else is entitled to their own opinion. So that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and feel free to disagree or agree in the comments below. I'll be seeing you like always next week, but until then, I hope it's a great one for you. Sayonara.